Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the world. My name is Peter McLeod, and I welcome you all to this latest edition of Logistics Business Conversations, brought to you today by Sentry Protection Products. Today's conversation is likely to take us in slightly different directions than our regular podcasts, as my guest, Jim Ryan, the founder and owner of Sentry Protection Products, and I are going to talk about one of his interests outside of the world of warehousing, namely cycling. But don't worry, we'll be drawing strong parallels throughout the podcast between his favourite pastime and the products and practices that work in tandem, if you'll pardon the pun, to drive up levels of warehouse safety. So for the non-cyclists among you, we may also dip into other sports to discuss further examples of similarities. Now, first of all, I want to welcome you to the show, Jim. It's great to be chatting with you today.
It's always good to be talking to you, Peter.
Now, before we started recording, we were discussing how to cover what could be described as, a rather dry topic of warehouse safety. But you came up with this great idea of tying it into one of your big extracurricular passions, namely cycling. So I think probably to kick us off, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your endeavors on two wheels?
Well, like anyone, cycling is one of the first things that you pick up, and when you're a young boy, and it always represented the first bit of freedom, that you didn't have to be carted around by your parents or something. So it was always something that I did. Always, no matter what I was doing in school, was always cycling. Back in school, I was involved in other sports. I was in American football. I was a wrestler, but always during this, always cycling is something else. And then through the middle of my career, I ended up in a town, Indianapolis, Indiana, where I'm heading to this weekend. And they happen to have a very big cycling community. I don't know if you remember the movie from back in the 1980s, Breaking Away. I don't know if that was, that was all about Indiana University and their little 500. And from that exposed a lot of how cycling crazy Indiana was. And I was lucky enough there that they actually had a velodrome, probably about that time, about 3 or 4 velodromes across the United States. Now I think there's more, but it was really great because they had a nice program there. They had some really good track cyclists. A gentleman named Roger Young ran the program. He and his sister Sheila Young were very big speed skaters, Olympic speed skaters and cyclists, and ran a fantastic program. So I was lucky enough to be able to ride at the velodrome, and that really took something from being just a hobby into something that was really a lot more, concentrated on, jumped into, worked out, kind of felt like that was really, at that time, a real passion. But again, eventually realized that as good as I was at it, I was nowhere close to the levels that would have to take me to the top. So what do they say? Keep your day job, and I kept my day job. So.
Yeah, like a lot of men of our age and ladies as well, Jim, we eschewed the golf club for the bicycle.
Yes, yeah, there we go. Golf is the same way. You can get good at it, but you're not going to be like those guys that are on television. It's just a whole level way above where you are.
Absolutely. Now, we are going to be drawing parallels between cycling and warehouse safety. And I think, we will move on to the realms of PPE, protection of the self and of those around us, and also infrastructural and training and those sorts of areas. But let's be a little bit more sort of conceptual to start off with. Let's say that when you're riding a bicycle, it only really works optimally when it's moving forward. You stop, you fall over. So, what sort of parallels can you draw there with your life in business and developing products?
Well, exactly that. I think that's it's a perfect parallel because, as you say, if you stop if you stop a bicycle, it falls right over, and you don't not only don't go anywhere, but you fail completely. And we have always felt that way. With my career, at least at Sentry Protection, 27 years ago, we came up with the concept of a energy absorbing column protector for building columns. I wasn't the inventor. We actually bought the patent from the person who brought it to us, but we created Sentry around that idea. But we were always looking at what's next, what's a good addition to what we do, and we continually try to do that. We try to move the bicycle forward, I guess, as you'd say there,
Yeah.
because if we're just relying on what we've done in the past, it's eventually going to fall over.
Sure, and I guess as those of us who've ended up in should I say, in a thorny bush or even on a hard pavement, once you're clipped in with your cleats,
That's
you have to show a true commitment to
that's
the task.
commitment. Yes, yeah. I thought of the cleats. I'm of the age where I was even before the step-in cleats, where you actually had to take and you strapped yourself in and you were locked in, and there was no popping out. So that's real commitment.
But that shows a sort of single-mindedness in the task, and I guess you need to have that to be an entrepreneur and a successful entrepreneur in the sort of product development and bringing them to market.
Yeah, I think there's always a little bit of restlessness there, as any entrepreneur sees. There's always something new. There's always something next. So that's kind of the way I've approached our business, in life, I guess.
You've done some long trips on two wheels. A to B, thousands of kilometres, thousands of miles, which if I've heard you talk about in the past, and I've been immensely impressed. But it's not just about getting there in the fastest possible times. You develop. You need to plan for a start, but then you develop and learn along the way, absorbing those influences that you come up against along the way. What are the sort of parallels there when we talk about business and cycling?
Well, you brought up something about my long distance cycling. Of course, I'm a bit older now, and racing is really not part of my of what I'm going to be doing. So my brother and I have started out in doing some long distance trips, and about 5 years ago, we did a trip from the Pacific to the Atlantic. So we went all the way across America. It's interesting. It's a great way of not only seeing the country, but seeing how, challenging yourself. And I think there are parallels with business and with the planning that we would do for that. For example, every day when we set out, there's a different set of challenges ahead of you. And, looking at those, trying to plan. I mean, every day we would look at our plan and say, okay, we're going to have 3 different outcomes here. We're going to have our typical goal. We're going to go from here to this next town or this next campsite or something like that. But we also included 2 other destinations, one of which was what happens if we, really do a good job? What's what we called our stretch? And unfortunately, you always have to figure out what's your bailout. So every day we would go with a destination in mind and a stretch and a bailout. And when we were prepared for any of those, then there's not such a panic when something happens and you have a breakdown, when you have the weather just doesn't cooperate. There's so many things, and I look at that as so much like business. If you don't have a plan, you're not going to really get anywhere. But you also have to be flexible in what you do, because in the business world as in the world itself, it's not always up to what you do. It's the environment around you, what happens, what good luck or bad luck will you run into. And if you're a little bit more prepared for it, then it's not such a panic. It's just, oh, okay, well, here's the next thing. This is what we're going to do. And instead of looking backwards and cursing your bad luck, you're like, okay, this is our next
Yeah.
step.
So you have to be open to that sort of in-flight change of strategy. But I presume those decisions are met more easy if you have a plan B and a plan C, or you have you have the knowledge to make those decisions.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You have to think about what happens. Sometimes it's a matter of what happens if we're actually successful at this. Where do we go from there?
Yeah.
And then you start a new set of plans.
Yeah,
So
success may surprise you if you're
yeah,
not geared up for manufacturing at scale, for example.
yes, yeah, and there are a lot of strange things going on as we speak, and we're having to create contingency plans and discuss how changes in world trade are going to affect us, and what's our destination, what's our bailout spot, and what's our stretch. So
Yeah, and we could sort of we can allude to these the famous known knowns and known unknowns quotes.
yes,
And we hear that a lot in the supply chain generally. Trying to predict those hurdles and challenges, and it's all very well. You're going to come up against a headwind at some point when you're on a bike, but
yeah,
you don't know that there's going to be a zebra come chasing you at
yeah,
some point. But you need to know how to behave and how to react should that be the case. You may not know what animal it's going to be, but you
yeah,
need to know what the hell to do to get the hell out of there.
yeah.
And it's not also about having the sort of the fastest, strongest bike. You could say it's about sort of making sure everything is there in the plan. The backup, the supplies as well. I guess.
And I love the topic you bring up of headwinds, because that's absolutely a part of, well, let's say our trip across Kansas became, the Wizard of Oz brings up the idea of Kansas tornadoes, but just the winds across that very flat land put us on our trip into an area that we were absolutely pushing against headwinds that were just tremendous. And again, as a parallel to business, you have to look at that and say, okay, how are we going to react? In our case, there were only a few of us, two of us, but the way that cycling works is that people have to work together. And when you do that, you share that burden, you share the lead and you're drawn behind someone else when you are drafting behind them. So I look at that as something that you have to do every day in business. Sometimes you have to team up with others that can help share the load. And by doing so, you get farther down the road and you share that burden, and it's not so hard.
I guess it's also fair, in cycling and in business, to say that those alliances, collaborations, can be described also as unlikely. You may be teaming up with a competitor just so that the pair of you or the group of you can push a hole through the air to get ahead of whoever may be behind. And I guess and I think you've touched on it before in conversations you and I have had. You've actually worked with competitors just to bring forward, you could say, awareness or development of a particular product or a type of product, just for the general good of the industry.
Yeah, I mean, you could very much see this in the way the reaction of, especially our forays into Europe with our radical idea of a plastic energy absorbing column protector. And, we brought this in 25 years ago right now. 2000 was the first time we really spent an effort to do so, because we felt like this was a positive thing for safety in warehouses, anywhere where you're running forklifts or any kind of vehicles through there. But, to try to convince people of that, it was a hard road. I remember talking to people, especially in Germany, where they're used to solid steel products, and hearing from them saying, well, who approved this? And I said, well, no one's approved this. This is a new idea. And no one was willing to push it forward. And ironically, I think the idea of doing it moved forward when other companies began to copy what we did. So now, again, you look at it sometimes having competitors, you look at it saying, oh gosh, we brought this idea to market, but at the same time, it never was really accepted until people saw that, well, there's 2 or 3 or 4, or more varieties of this. Must be an idea that I might try. And it kind of pushed through that resistance when folks saw that, this is something that others must have done. And then the whole idea becomes accepted, and then that really pushes the whole industry forward. So in doing so, again, there are days when I look at and say, I wish I didn't have so many competitors, but then I realize, especially for our European sales, that they wouldn't have gotten anywhere until we did have competitors. So it's I'm always fascinated with especially watching the Grand Tours and cycling, where you see a breakaway happens and it's not always going to be your team. And it's fascinating to watch the way that different cyclists from different teams team up, knowing that in the end, you're still trying to win, but without cooperation to some degree, there's wary cooperation. They always know that in the end, you're not there to help the other person win, but you're there to cooperate during that time when maybe you're breaking away, trying to stay away from the rest of the peloton. So
Yeah, I guess you could turn it around and say you're not there so everyone will win, but you're there to guarantee that one of you will win, or at least that
yes,
none of you will be losers.
yeah, absolutely. And the different cooperations that you end up having, it really depends upon the opportunity and the situation. So that's what I find fascinating about cycling, and I look at that for what we've done, and I just say that's exactly how it is in the business world.
Now, forgive me, I will get round to a point at the end of this little section. So you're
Yes.
talking about businesses in Germany, particularly, you're saying sort of seeing something that's a little bit different from their previous norm. And my mind immediately went to ski jumping and high jumping, trying to bring in the non-cyclists here, if you see what I'm doing.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, a certain guy called Fosbury decided
Yeah.
to jump over the bar in a completely different way, and everybody looked at him and thought he was mad. And I believe he was a Japanese ski jumper who decided back in the 80s, I think it would have been, to abandon the parallel skis stance and throw himself off a mountainside with his legs wide apart and his arms out. That goes against conventional wisdom, but ultimately everybody ends up doing it because they see that it's right. So I just,
Yeah.
and I think you explained to me previously at Logimat this year, for example, there was a time when you were the only one with these collapsible, or should I say absorbent, warehouse barriers, racking barriers, and now you look around the hall you were in, and there were quite a few others there.
Hull one at Logimat was, I think it was the subtitle was "Yellow Plastic Absorbing, Protectors." I think that was because it seemed like everyone there was doing that. But again, everybody's got a different idea, a different twist on it. We occupy what I think is the highest quality end of it because we've never compromised that. Again, but others have different twists on that, and I'm glad to see it. I mean, if you don't have competition, it pushes you forward. Like I said, you got to continue to move forward, and it inspires you to say, we've got to come up with a better idea. But again, as you say, it those crazy ideas, the Fosbury flop is now, the standard. And I see that in warehouses as some of the ideas that we brought forward 25 to 27 years ago are now the standard. And now, okay, what's next? How are we going to continue to push that?
It's interesting because in my previous life as a motor racing journalist, I picked up when you said you were travelling to Indianapolis this weekend,
Yes.
and to the listener who's hearing this kind of mid-June, apologies. We're recording this just before the Indianapolis 500 motor race in the US, which takes place on the Sunday after this recording. This week, or should I say last weekend, during qualifying, we've seen a couple of quite extraordinarily shocking accidents, which in previous generations would have not spelt. Well, let's say we wouldn't have seen the racing driver walking away from those. Now, one
Yes.
of the reasons for this is that the cars, when they hit the fence, they hit something what's called a safer barrier, which is a relatively new innovation in motorsport, which absorbs the impact, or quite a lot of the impact, of the car as it strikes the barrier. And I guess we're looking in warehouse safety here. A generation ago, forklift trucks would have struck solid objects, and it would have caused untold damage. And also the implications that come with that. So your products, which are absorbable and are high,
Hmm.
and I know from conversations with you before, you've tested them considerably. They also are designed ideally around the warehouse environment. They work in a similar way. So I just wondering if you can perhaps talk through some of their sort of physical qualities, and that'll sort of bring this back around to the warehouse.
Yeah, well, absolutely. If you see, I mean, years ago, at least in Indianapolis, and understand it's different from, say, Formula One racing, where it's mostly road courses. This is an oval where they reach in the straightaways. They reach 250 miles an hour. They're approaching 400 kilometers an hour
Yeah.
down those straightaways, and then you turn. And so many times the tire gives way or something. They used to hit concrete, and now they'll hit the safer barrier. And the whole idea behind it, just as in the products that we've introduced, was exactly that. It's like if you try to take that kind of force, the mass of that car or the mass of a fork truck, with the speed, and you try to decelerate to zero within a fraction of an inch, you're going to have damage. But if you just stretch that out a little bit, give it a little bit of room to decelerate, the results are amazing. And that's a principle we put forward with our Sentry products, is that the column Sentry, the rack Sentry, the corner Sentries are all put there so that your fork truck or whatever vehicle's running into it decelerates a little bit slower, and that allows for energy to be absorbed, and not only the person who's driving it, the vehicle itself, and the underlying column or rack, they all survive simply because you've turned that instantaneous deceleration into a gradual deceleration. And the physics of it are clear. It's just how do we continue to apply that to things? And again, I look at some of the guardrails that are out there right now. A number of people doing those guardrails. Same principle behind it. It's slower deceleration. It makes sense. Instead of hitting something solid, where a steel guardrail is going to stop you, but it's gonna wreak some damage to the fork truck and probably jar the driver right off that forklift. Well, hitting something softer, it's a much better experience for everyone.
Yeah, there's also another parallel between motorsport and warehouse operations, is that balance between speed, or you could say speed of operations,
Absolutely.
and efficiency versus safety. And you could almost divide that into three or four sections. You've got the sort of from the operator's perspective, you've got the actual vehicle that the operator is riding. We could also bring that back to cycling as well, and some of the sort of built-in safety that comes with those. You've got the infrastructural, which I think we've covered quite well. And I think we've also got training, mindset as well.
Yes.
You can't go into an environment, let's say a warehouse environment, thinking I'm safe because I've got all the bells and whistles around me that are going to stop me hitting a column or a colleague, even worse.
Yeah.
But let's not take our attention away from the safety practices as much as safety equipment.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to what we were talking about planning. You have to envision what a safe warehouse not only looks like, but it feels like, and you have to continue to think about those things. When you envision a safe a safe environment, you have to talk about it. You have to plan for it. Your practices have to encourage that. But again, as you said, Peter, you have to balance that with productivity. So you it's like we'd never have a car accident out there if we all just drove at 5 miles
Yeah.
per hour. I mean, there'd never be anything, but there wouldn't be much of a
Yeah.
purpose to have cars. So, the same thing happens in a warehouse. You need to operate, you need to keep efficiency going, but you need to do so in a way that you operate in a safe manner. So some of that is, add some things to your warehouse that will make you as safe as possible, but nothing replaces the safe attitude that you have to practice. You have to think about it. You have to talk about it. You have to accept nothing less when you're operating a warehouse. Safety's first.
I think eyes and ears are very vital there, as well as engaging the brain. But
Mm-hmm.
eyes are all very well, but you can't see around corners. So that's where the sort of the infrastructural safety comes in, and that's an area where you've worked in as well, isn't it? And particularly around the pinch points where maybe two forklifts make a collide, or a forklift and personnel make a collide around a blind
Mm-hmm.
corner. What are
Mm-hmm.
you doing in those particular areas?
Well, that's a product that we brought out originally in 2013. It's hard to imagine, but again, we brought out an idea and a product that is mounted on a blind corner. We call it a collision sentry, going with the sentry theme. But that's exactly what it's for, is to avoid collisions we have sensors that look down each end of a 90-degree corner. So if you're approaching a corner and you can't see around it, the sensor sees you coming and looks around that corner. And if someone's coming in that direction too, it automatically sends off a audible and visual alarm. And it doesn't tell you what's there, but it alarms you that, okay, there's a possibility exists of a collision. Be very careful at this juncture. Now, again, we look at it as kind of a electronic mirror, you could say, but so many of the mirrors that we see in warehouses, first of all, you mount them so high so that you can see, and I've yet to witness anybody actually looking at them because in a lot of ways, it makes it unsafe. You have to take your eyes off of where you're going to look up, and then your brain has to figure out that funhouse mirror, and is someone go away from me? Is somebody moving? All that. In our case, we instantaneously just make that decision for you, send the warning, and then off you go. What you do with it,
So listeners tuning in for some quality cycling content, we're getting a little bit disheartened now because we're going all warehousey on them. But you did send me a message saying there was a device, radar-based rear flashers, produced by companies such as Garmin.
Yes.
Which is kind of, I guess it's that third eye, is it? Does that work in the same way on a bicycle?
Oh, absolutely. A few years ago, they came out with radar-based rear flashing lights, and immediately that became or should become the standard, because not only does it flash to warn, say someone in an automobile that you're there, but it also informs the rider. There's a little head unit that I have in the front of my bicycles where it's telling me the maps, it's telling me the distance, the little cycling computer, but the radar in the back is also informing me that, okay, someone's approaching from behind you. And to me, that's brilliant. And, further, at least, and again, I know there's some other competitors in there, but Garmin came out with one where it flashes more intensely, and it really gets the attention of the car. So a lot like what we're doing with our collision sentry, where they're just alerting you that something's different and something is, you should look out for it. It's not going to make those decisions for you to say, oh, don't veer off the road into the bicycle, or bicycle, hey, don't, it's making you aware that someone is there. Be extra alert during that time. Do the safest thing possible, but knowledge is the most important part. You know that someone's there. They know that you're there. It makes for a much safer environment.
Yes, and these sorts of I don't want to call them gadgets because that's dismissive of their function, but they're developed and they're experimented upon, and in all kinds of different methods, different environments, different scenarios, and I guess that's the same with your products as well. You can't just come up with a great idea and say, hey, let's put that out into the market. There's got to be sort of real world testing going on. So,
Absolutely.
how important is that to the development of your products?
Absolutely. I mean, I can look at things from the first product that we ever brought out. Everything from that point, first of all, came upon from requests from customers. Gosh, if you just had a column protector for my pallet racks, light bulb that goes off after someone brings it, that's a great idea. Let's think about that. Let's start doing it. So then, we experimented with different thicknesses and heights and ways of doing it, materials, and we hit and hit and hit forklifts into pallet racks, into walls, into everything like that, to continually try to figure out, okay, if we're going to introduce a new safety product, we've got to put our best foot forward, because if someone doesn't believe in it, it's going to fail immediately. So we spent a lot of time working on these ideas, putting them forward, and we continue to do so today. And hopefully, within the next year or two, we'll see if some of these current ideas that we're working on will come to fruition. But we'll always be trying to push that bicycle forward.
Yeah, and it's a challenging environment, developing a product in the long run, and also taking part in your extreme cycling adventures. You challenge yourself, but you're also challenging those around you, ultimately to achieve the same goal.
Yeah, as in cycling, it's a team sport, but it's made up of individuals, and they all have their own goals and they all have their own desires, but you gotta try to work them together.
And I just want to kind of bring things around towards the end as we're reaching the end of our allotted time, unfortunately, Jim. It strikes me there are great parallels between a busy warehouse environment with forklift trucks buzzing around, personnel walking across, some of whom may be wearing headphones. There's moving objects, fixed objects, unpredictable behaviors, chaos, distractions. You've got changing conditions, you've got bumps in the road, quite literally. What would you say? I guess the advice is to sort of equip yourself with the best physical safety and warning systems, and then adjust your behavior around the conditions and stay aware at all times. Would you say those kind of good takeaways?
Yeah. Stop looking at your phone.
That's a great one for life.
Yeah. Right. Overall, stop looking at your phone.
Yeah.
But absolutely. I mean, the whole point of this, when you look at safety in a warehouse environment, it's a very unique place. If you can think of, here it is, the Indy 500, it'd be like people walking in the middle of the track as these cars are flying by. That's what we do every day in a warehouse. The proximity of people and very large, massive objects is just too close. So you really, really have to create a safe environment. And part of that is equipping the environment with what you can, but part of that is training, because the whole point of this is it's an investment in people. Your people are your most valuable resource. You talk to any business owner, and that's absolutely the truth. They say, well, why were you successful? We have the best people. Well, you want to be able to send those people home at night in the same condition that they showed up in the morning. You don't want to have someone suffer unnecessarily. And safety is a key portion of keeping your not just people safe, but your business running, because your business relies on these people. So do what you can for them. Invest in them. It's the best investment in your business.
Absolutely. Well, I have to say, it's been a very enjoyable discussion. We did
Absolutely.
manage to talk about warehousing, and we did manage to talk about cycling. So I think we ticked all the boxes we intended to. I was wondering, Jim, whether in conclusion you can summarise the importance of prioritising safety in the warehouse. And what would you say to those, and I hear them too, who argue that investment in safety is a cost they simply cannot afford?
Well, as I just mentioned, if you don't value your people, then that might be your attitude there. But I look at it as saying, the first thing that you have to think about is your people. Um, it's hard to say that you can't. Would you say I can't afford people? If your business is made of them, our organizations are teams, and you have to work as a team, and you have to be as a team. And so investments in safety are just an investment in your workforce, the continuity of your business. To me, it's absolutely highest priority. Ahead in most cases of productivity, because when you have a safe environment, you're going to get that productivity. You'll get the throughput. You'll get happier people, and when you have happier people, they're going to look out for you just like you looked out for them. So an investment in their safety is an investment in yourself.
Jim, I want to thank you for taking part in this edition of Logistics Business Conversations.
Well,
I want
thank
to
you, Peter.
thank Century Production Products for supporting this edition, and also want to thank you, the listener, for joining us today. Wherever you get your podcasts from, please remember to subscribe to Logistics Business Conversations to make sure the next edition is delivered straight to you as soon as it's released. Until then, it's goodbye from Jim Ryan,
Goodbye.
and it's goodbye from me, Peter McLeod. Goodbye. And